Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Questini here with a discussion about Khorne and Skarbrand in Total War Warhammer 3 Immortal Empires, because Creative Assembly has decided that their next DLC is going to feature Khorne, Greenskins, and Ogres. I'll talk about the leaks later on in the video, though I have said a lot of the things I would like to say, but there's still a couple of things to mention on this subject later on. But here's the thing people need to understand about Khorne. While obviously at the moment Khorne is Skarbrand is Khorne, that is not necessarily going to be the case going forward. We know Creative Assembly does make varied campaigns, especially with DLC, so new mechanics, new lore effects, etc. And this is very important for a discussion on the subject of Khorne, because a lot of people will say, well, you can win a campaign as Skarbrand faster than any other campaign. I mean, certainly this is turn 38, and even though I wasn't necessarily very optimal in this, to be clear, I made quite a few mistakes in some of my movements, I have achieved a long campaign victory condition, and point of fact, I'm at almost 100 settlements by turn 38. So yeah, you can win a campaign fairly quickly. It doesn't mean it's a fun experience necessarily. I'll get into that in just a moment. But basically, Skarbrand looked at Nehekara and decided he really wanted it to be the Land of Dead. He looked at the Empire and decided he didn't want to see it anymore in this campaign. Oh yes, we still have those blood toasts. So the Empire's gone. But here's the thing, what's annoying about this inherent mechanic of like, oh, we're just going to raise everything to the ground, unlike, say, the Beastmen, right? Who can raise elements to the ground, who can and do have an entire campaign system based on around that. The issue for Khorne is, yeah, you can win the campaign very, very quickly, undeniably so, but in the long term you're screwed, because all of the territory that you're raising to the ground, all of that territory can be recaptured by other factions. It's a difference between Skarbrand, Khorne, and the Beastmen. All of the Beastmen campaigns with the Hearthstones. Honestly, like, one of the reasons I personally dislike Skarbrand is Tarx's campaign has much better freaking mechanics, because in Tarx's campaign you still loot and pillage your way across the world, but it's not just an early game situation, it's a long campaign situation. The problem inherently with Khorne, which is not a great design for Warhammer 3, is that while the early game can be great, the long campaign is not really workable in a lot of ways. You neither have the army, the territory, the territorial control, the economy to really make that work. But then let's consider something about Khorne. You know how Skarbrand's campaign movement range is one of his main strengths, that you raise settlements, you gain campaign movement range. Well, those are tied to Skarbrand specifically, not to Khorne as a race. Remember that, because with the variety of lords, that is going to be important. So you gain replenishment foreign territory, campaign movement range when raising a settlement, and a lot of campaign movement range inherently from lord effects and special skill line with Skarbrand. The things that do help a movement range from a racial perspective are Call of Baal, Eternal War if you do have the ability of, replenishment movement after with a particular character, so that only really works with Skarbrand, and that's it. Those are the only things. I mean, there's a couple of other things to be sure that do help you over here with this, like the Blood Hosts. Now, the Blood Hosts certainly are a Khorne specific affair, and why exactly am I researching that? I have no idea, to tell you. Maybe because there's no... Well, maybe blood first attrition. So blood hosts, as well as the unholy manifestations, which honestly are kind of a crap system, like too long of a cooldown in many ways, all that. Although some of them are fast, but yeah, I consider Call to Battle, Eternal War, it can be a bit frustrating with respect to that. But if you take the campaign movement range, the ability of replenishing campaign movement range, then suddenly you end up in situations where you're moving very slow. You can still get a lot of money from sacking and looting settlements, but here's the inherent problem with that as well, though I don't think I have enough movement range to showcase that over there. Maybe let's go after Draika. Yeah, let's do that. The problem, one of the big problems over here is that when let's say, and yes, I am using unresolved mods for this because, yeah, obviously. The issue is multiple-fold. One, when you're playing a Khorne campaign, you want to obviously raise and burn everything to the ground, especially with Scarbrand, because he gets that movement range back. And with every army, because you get that movement range back as a faction effect. But here's the issue. The game inherently is about occupying settlements. And even beastmen who only have their hearthstones, they at least prevent other factions from doing that. It doesn't work like that for you. You have to spend skulls to take any kind of settlement. If you want money, you have to sack a settlement. Because the other post-battle options, the raised ones, do not give you any kind of money. They give you skulls, they give you blood hosts. So I think that's one of the things I would certainly change, or at least change it in this way. That when you go for a skull option, you also get money. Or, I don't know, like if you summon the blood host, but maybe not, right? Because you're already getting replenishment like that. So you should gain money. You should not have the ability of sacking settlements as freaking Khorne. You should have the ability of just raising them and occupying them. That would be something that would help, I think. And we can talk about how, like, there's that issue of, like, settlements. So you have an entire race that's reliant on doing this. And one of the reasons you're reliant on doing this is, one, you will have very few settlements. And two, even when you have a good amount of settlements, the actual economy of those settlements is irrelevant. So, like, you don't have really an economic structure. All your economic structures are basically post-battle casualty replenishment structures, leadership debuffs, chance to automatically colonize ruined regions in the province. Now, the problem with this, again, you have a chance of retaking ruined settlements, but it is going to take time to do so. There's a chance you can increase it, of course, but the issue is there's nothing stopping the AI from taking these settlements before you, which is where it gets annoying. Now, certainly, Khorne doesn't necessarily need full provinces. There's a couple of benefits, but they're not necessarily too big. Rebellions aren't really a thing that happen because of Khorne corruption and the control it provides. But still, you create a situation where you have virtually no economy except the one you get from sacking and looting settlements or post-battle loot in general. But you don't want to sack settlements because if you do sack settlements, you can't raise them that turn. So maybe that's another change that CA should add, that we should be able to raise and sack settlements on the same turn, if they don't want to give us a post-battle loot. Or honestly, just remove the whole sacking aspect for Khorne. Like, I'll give you guys an idea of a race that kind of handles some things better. Consider, well, if there's any of them, yeah, there are some Skaven, though I think Snitch is losing here. But consider the Skaven. In a Skaven campaign, every settlement that you take, unless you spend food on it, reduces that settlement level to 1. But here's the thing about Skaven. As long as you have movement range, you can sack a settlement and then occupy that settlement the same turn. It does, and even if you want to spend food, you can still spend food to get the settlement to tier 5 after you've sacked it. So let's say you sack a tier 5 capital, you get tons of freaking money as the Skaven, and then you can just take that settlement and spend all the food to get it back to tier 5 again. That's why Skaven are an amazing race in the game at the moment, because their mechanics work within the context of the overall meta. Like, they're building settlements. They're undercities, whatever, all undercities or those kind of things. Well, Elspeth and Oxyatl do work, but yeah, I think like the Skaven undercities are kind of a gimmick that should be changed. We can talk about that when CA decides to add in Skaven. If they decide to add an Skaven DLC, I imagine Tankwell is going to be the case. So those are some of the things. But there's something else entirely. Let's talk about movement after raising a settlement, because this is where it gets really annoying if you're playing a Khorne campaign. And this is probably one of the fundamental things in the game in general that I would change, especially for characters that rely on raising settlements. So Scarbrand and Tarax in particular. So when you raise a settlement, let me just do this over here. The way your movement, your character is going to move away from that settlement. So if I raise Nagrond over here and, you know, get the skulls. By the way, I have so many skulls, I have no clue what to do with them. I'm just not summoning Blood Host because, well, I don't really need to summon Blood Host every single time, and I'd go bankrupt in a turn if I just kept summoning Blood Host. But that's the issue. The way you move when you, ignore the reliability, but the way you move when you raise a settlement is you're moving always backwards. There's certainly some terrain issues that do happen there, and yes, we did get the Nemesis Crown. Forget about teleporting in Nagron. Yeah, this is the way to place Scarbrand. But the problem that comes in this, when you move backwards, even if it's just by a bit, like if Scarbrand were to move towards Great Arena or Grond or Ashrak, I would obviously be able to reach any of those settlements. It probably would be better to go for Great Arena and Grond. So this is kind of one of the frustrations that you do have, that you kind of need to move around settlements and then figure out, okay, how am I going to freaking do this, right? That kind of stuff. One of the things you can certainly take advantage of is if you're not at war with a faction and you're about to declare war, you can move right on top of their settlements from force march stance. Though in this case I can't switch back to normal stance because I think I just, I may have spent all my movement. But you can move to a settlement that's neutral right on top of it, and you move in such a position that you can decide which direction you're, like, you know which direction your character is going to move to once you do raise it. That is such a frustrating experience, I gotta tell you. It's like, ooh, like, do I have enough movement? Will I be able to switch Scarbrand from Force March to normal stance in this particular campaign? Yeah, I gotta tell you, that's a gimmick as hell. Another thing related to Khorne, as it currently works, keep in mind all that I said about, like, having a very fast campaign pace, because your long campaign just doesn't work. Well, the problem with that is Khorne's structures are gonna take as long to build as the Lizardmen. Now you have a lot more growth than the Lizardmen, because every single one of your blood hosts and every single one of your armies, you certainly abuse this, but every single one of your armies has this meter. It has to be said that someone did comment, you know, reskinning the greenskin, the greenskin WA meter to red does not make it an interesting mechanic. I agree firmly with that. So maybe we should have like a global meter that's indicating our bloodletting. Yes, I am saying take what the greenskins have with their WA meter, replace the fucking individual army system, because right now, yeah, it works well with a couple of blood hosts and Scarbrand, and maybe tune down the effects, but obviously, or maybe make the effects global. Same effects, right? Upkeep, all that. But that would incentivize a playstyle where you have more armies, where you build more armies. Because if every army has upkeep, casualty replenishment, and all that, or maybe, you know, change what effects you're getting. There's some interesting possibilities. Like maybe you can choose which effects you're getting. Maybe your entire campaign system is built around, like, okay, you're sacrificing skulls to Khorne, and he gives you various benefits for it. I'm just throwing that idea out there. I'm not saying that's what they should do. I'm not the game developer. I'm an analyst. I can analyze issues. I'm not necessarily the one to come up with ideas. I'm just telling you when there are problems, I don't necessarily have the solution to the problem. Or I have solutions, but not necessarily, you know, completely brand new gameplay ideas. And I think that, because that's one thing that's what CA should worry about. Okay, so that's one of the issues. But going back to the settlement mechanic system, and yes, we did get the Nemesis Crown. Will I ever drop it, I wonder? I am certainly losing the ability of automatically colonizing some ruined regions. It's like, that's such a horrible negative effect. You think I give a damn? Oh boy. Especially, like, you give Scarbrand 20% campaign movement range and it goes all the way to 30%. Oof, that level of the Nemesis Crown, that is going to be sweet. But anyway, that's a lot of battles, by the way, to fight with just a 4 turn. Getting that crown to the highest level is certainly something. Regardless of that particular situation, the problem with Khorne settlements, beyond the fact that you don't have an economy, is how freaking long it takes to build something. Actually, I won't use my capital, I'll use this particular settlement. Also, for someone who's a world wanderer, climate is actually quite freaking limited. Like, this is the weird aspect. It's like, you're the freight train of a campaign, but you have so many climates that are unpleasant. It's not too big of a deal, and I would not necessarily make a campaign based on climate in a Scarbrand freaking situation. It just affects your casualty replenishment rate. We'll talk about how that's relevant in just a moment. But you have a lot of casualty replenishment. That's not the problem, because obviously you do have enough cultists of Khorne who replenish troops. But here's the issue. Because structures take so long, and because you don't really have much of economy, and because any secondary or tertiary army you have is vastly insignificant compared to Scarbrand, and also because, weirdly enough, the main settlement structures have just as poor of a growth as the dwarves did pre-Thrones of Decay. Jeez, I didn't... Like, it's not something you think about or even bother with, but, like, when you actually look at the statistics and put them, like, yeah, obviously Blood Toast, the bloodletting mechanic, helps out to that, but people tend to look at a bloodletting mechanic and say, oh, it's an awesome mechanic. They ignore the issues that come with the race. Like, you get upkeep, but your economy is trash. You get growth, but your growth is almost as bad as the dwarves were pre-patch, and so on and so forth. So don't just look at one mechanic and say, oh, this is awesome. Look at the entire race and understand what that mechanic is helping to fix. Now, here's the problem. A tier 4 capital takes 7 turns. I don't have any, like, minor settlement to show you or anything. Or maybe this one. No. Okay, I think... Okay, like a tier 3 settlement takes 6 turns. 7 turns, then 8 turns. So you're spending... You have a campaign that inherently is built around the idea of aggression and speed. But then you have a campaign system where it getting beyond tier 3 just takes a freaking long time. And let's consider what Scarbrand has at tier 3. What exactly you have. You have obviously cast warriors with dual weapons and regular ones, but you can recruit regular cast warriors in any settlement. Now, you may want to switch them, but keep in mind, even getting to tier 3 and spending the money, because your units are incredibly expensive to recruit, like maybe Scarbrand's or Khorne's recruitment costs should be lower globally. Like, you don't have any local recruitment, you just have a global pool. Just throwing that idea out there, but cheaper, inherently cheaper, because that would help fix one of the biggest issues, variety in armies. Not variety in blood hosts, which aren't real armies, but variety in your actual armies, because this is not fucking fun to play with. Like, in point of fact, just gonna point this out, like the Regiment's Renown, and like the variants of cast warriors and the bloodthirster here, I got these a lot later. Like, I've been playing this campaign, I started with bloodletters, then got rid of them, put cast warriors in. It's like, you think it's fun playing battles with just cast warriors with sword and shield? I can fucking tell you, it is not. That's one of the things. It is so freaking boring. The armies are so freaking boring. Blood horses have more variety, but they have their own issue. They have their own issue. But the thing is, when you look at this, like, consider a Skull Taker, right? Consider a cannon, right? It takes 2 turns. So many units that I can actually use here take 2 freaking fucking turns. I don't have 2 turns to spend. You lose, you gain money quickly through post-battle loot. You also lose it very quickly because blood hosts have upkeep, which, you know, maybe they shouldn't. They don't replenish, but they give you such benefits, and you do want to use them because you don't have any other armies to compete with the storms of armies that other factions have. But the problem is, when you look at this, you realize that you're just basically using bloodletters or exalted bloodletters and fucking cast warriors for pretty much your entire campaign. Certainly the part where it's relevant. By the time you could even recruit these units, you wouldn't be able to afford many of them, if any of them. And 2, the campaign is long over. Having a campaign recruitment system, growth system, construction time system that's slow, combined with a race or legendary lord, because it is Scarbrand, remember, it's not Khorne inherently, but having a system where you have slow building of settlements combined with a fast-moving Sonic Hedgehog campaign style makes for a tedious, boring as dirt campaign system. Now, as for Blood Hosts, yeah, they have more variety of units, but there is a but. You kind of don't use them in the most interesting way in battles. Why is that? Because Blood Hosts can't replenish, and because you want to keep Blood Hosts as intact as possible, because they too have the bloodletting, so they can get that growth, and you do want it, and also that casualty replenishment. But because and other benefits. So you're creating a situation with your Blood Host armies where the way you play with them is in the cheapest, cheesiest possible fucking way. And you can say, well, you don't have to necessarily carry their disposable armies. Fair enough, I understand that. They can support other armies and still get bloodletting. I get that. But, and I will say this much, but about this, if the entire gimmick of Scarbrand's campaign in terms of unit variety is that, oh, you get Blood Host to give you that unit variety, but then you don't want to use that unit variety because you want to preserve these units for when you actually get a serious battle, potentially, right? And because you want to keep the armies intact in order to keep the benefits here, then that's not a great system. It's actually annoying with the Grudge-Settler army for the dwarves because it just pushes you to play in such a cheesy way. But at least that's one army. It's not 20 fucking armies like that where you have to play. Furthermore, because even though you have great casualty replenishment, the fact that you may fight so many individual battles in turn, it means that even on lower difficulties, even with auto-resolve mods, you can play on easy with auto-resolve mods, and you still end up in situations that you want to fight the vast majority of the battles manually. But because you're moving so fast, you're basically dealing with tier 1, tier 2 garrisons. Those are not fun freaking battles. If people want to tell me that Khorne and Scarbrand are about the idea that, oh, it's battle focused and not campaign focused, fair enough. The battles are fucking shit. Dwarves have better mechanics. Beastmen have better and more interesting battles. Yeah, it's interesting winning a dozen freaking battles with just Scarbrand soloing everything or summoning Bloodletters with cultists. Absolutely. But the actual way you play battles and types of battles you're fighting are dull as dirt. Having opponents being able to put up a challenge is interesting. But because you trivialize so many things because of the raw campaign speed, it doesn't matter. Like, it's fun a couple of times, sure, but then you get so freaking bored playing this campaign. Legend of Total... Now, some people would say, well, Legend of Total War has stated that he really likes Scarbrand. Okay, but you gotta remember something else about Legend, because this is the thing that people don't understand about when Legend says stuff in one video. They tend to ignore the other things that he says. And what's annoying about that is a lot of the other things about perception that Legend says is like, it's like some throwaway comment in a live stream, or he's asked about something. So here's one of the things that Legend stated. Specifically in Malachi's video, he actually said this in a video, not the stream, but he had stated it previously in streams. Legend hates campaigns that are longer than 30 turns because you get bored. And I agree with him. I get bored after 30 turns. The most interesting part of a campaign is 30 turns. As annoying and boring as dealing with those tier 1 garrisons are, dealing with a campaign system past turn 30 is dull as dirt in general. There's few exceptions. Oxyatl, Malachi, dwarves in general, they have those kind of things. This is the reason I consider the dwarves the best race in the game at the moment. Not because they're the strongest or anything like that, but because they have campaign systems that make their long campaigns interesting, which is pretty fucking rare, I gotta tell you. And when I say interesting, I mean from the perspective of someone like myself, someone who spends thousands and thousands and thousands of hours playing this fucking game. That's one of the brilliant things they did about the dwarves. This is the principal reason I fucking hate Scarbrand. You combine, it's like he's not particularly fun in the early game because he's just using Chaos Warriors. Doesn't have army variety. Look at the dwarves. Look at the Empire. Look at the Greenskins. Look at the fucking Warriors of Chaos. They have so much better variety in their freaking armies early on, from the very start of their campaigns. Chaos Dwarves too. Those are great races. This is not a great race. It's not a fun race. And the system's in place, like, oh, you can fight 100 battles. I can fight 100 fucking tedious, shitty battles in a single turn. I get the power of that, but that's a shit system. That's my perspective. I mean, I think inherently that is what CA needs to make it. Harmonize things. Give us more army variety. Move away from this spam blood host bullshit system with raising 100 settlements in the game to more of a system that encourages longer campaigns. And look, that's going to be a process. The dwarves are the only race I would say that's great for. It's going to be a process, but I think it firmly that CA does need to engage in that process. It's going to take time. Not every race is going to get it, But the more and more and more they build up races, the more they improve the AI, the more they improve performance, and the more they improve the game, to not just create an interesting campaign in the first 30 turns, but an interesting campaign in 100 turns, the better off the game will be. More army varieties. Like, that's one of the issues people complain about campaign AI. So those are the inherent things that I hope CA worries about with Khorne. And in general, not just Khorne. Greenskins, Ogres as well. Now, let me talk about the leaks. Because, oh boy, am I going to have to talk about it. Right now, the popular argument made by certain corners of the internet, Reddit in particular, is like, oh, the leakers were wrong, YouTubers don't know what they're talking about. I was reminded quite recently about one thing. That a lot of the people that are probably saying this are probably the same kind of fucking people that were defending CA when SOC came out. It's like, it's the same kind of person. And also, I have to say this to Reddit. You're not as fucking relevant as you think you are. And I say this because you might think a couple hundred people that post there every day, and it's no more than that. Like, you might have 1,000, 2,000 people that vote every day, individual votes. You might have thousands more that watch Reddit, but the actual people engaging the conversations on Reddit every day, it's like maybe 1,000 people at most on the Total War Reddit. For all the hundreds of thousands of people that are part of the Total War Reddit, that's the active community of that Reddit. Let me say this bluntly. There's 30,000 active concurrent players in Warhammer 3 at the moment. 20,000, 30,000, 40,000. Depends on the day. Like, it's weekend. I haven't looked at the statistics, but last weekend was like 40,000. You're 1/40th of the fucking community that currently plays the game. And that's assuming that there's 1,000 people. And that's assuming those 1,000 people agree on things. And I can tell you a lot of people do disagree on things. I say this because this whole thing, like, I want to remind people that in my comment section on my YouTube channel, for almost 2 years, I got so many people from Reddit, from other corners, mocking me, laughing, belittling me, because it's like, oh, because I said Scarbrand was a shit campaign. That's what I said. I believe it. I firmly believe it right now. Far more so than I ever did. Why do I firmly believe it? Well, I firmly believe it because I did polls with thousands of fucking votes, and overwhelmingly people voted that it is a shit campaign. In multiple polls, consistently. Same with Ogres, same with Norska, etc. Same with XY races. Now, some will say, oh, but those are just polls of your community. False. That is so freaking false, because the actual results do not match a lot of things that I view. For instance, they do not match my perception of Greenskins. They do not match my perception of Dark Elves. Like, Greenskins a B tier race according to the polls I've done. For me, they're freaking S tier. That's just an example, probably the biggest example. As a note, Cetra being the best Tomb King campaign, Vlad being better than Isabella to play as a legendary lord. I've made this point many times. Isabella is the better choice, and so on and so forth. I can go down the list. It's a long list. So no, it's not just people that agree with me that are voting in those polls. That's what people feel about it. But like, go tell that to Reddit, and you get raked over the coals because you don't know how to play the game or all that bullshit. My dude, I make a living playing this game on legendary difficulty. I think I know how to play the game. I've been playing this series since some people that are playing the series have been alive. Like, because I'm serious, I've been playing the series for almost 20 goddamn years. Some people were in diapers when I started playing this series of Total War. So yeah, I know how to play Total War. I know how to play Warhammer 3. Thank you. Take your gaslighting comments elsewhere. Thank you very much. Now, I mention all of that, not as vindication, because ultimately I did get vindicated on everything I had said on Scarbrand. Perhaps even more so. Like, I would have put them in C or D tier. No, people put them in F. F. Just gonna give you that idea. Now, having said that, let me talk about the leaks and what people are saying. The common arguments, like, of course the leakers were wrong because there's no way CA could have changed their plans so quickly. That's the pot calling the kettle black. Quite bluntly speaking. People take the piss on leakers, or people like myself who talked about the leaks, because they say, oh, you were wrong, right? Was I? I mean, I think we all said this. I think every person that talked about a leak on YouTube said this very, very fucking clearly, that this is not definitive. That one of the things I said in all of my videos on the leaks is, things can change. I said this many freaking times from the very start. And it's also worth pointing out the leaks did not start on YouTube, contrary to what people say. It's not like people are giving Legend trash for his video. Legend did not start the leaks. He wasn't even the first person. He was like the 20th person or something like that on YouTube that started talking about the leaks. That made a video on the leaks. Many of us made videos. Now, he was talking about them beforehand in his stream, so he wasn't making a video on it. He honestly probably wasn't even interested in making a video. Oh, he made money on that. Okay, do you know how much money Legend makes a year? How much money he makes a day? Assuming that the video will like 200,000 views or 250,000 views, according to his statement on that. He didn't tell me how much he makes, right? I do talk with Legend, but that's not a question you ask. Just, simple professionalism among content creators. But he did make that post on the community that says he made $1,000 in that video. So that means he makes $4 for every 1,000 views. Dude, he makes hundreds of thousands of views a day. 300,000, maybe more. He certainly makes over 200,000. So he's making well over $1,000 fucking dollars every single day, if not 1,500. Depends on a number of factors. Video length is an important factor, which, by the way, is one of the reasons his disaster battles and campaigns probably are the most profitable videos he does on the fucking channel. Not his live streams, not the video talking about leaks, because those are shorter. No, 40-minute, 50-long videos, depending on how many ads he puts in that, assuming the revenues for every view he gets $4. Or for every 1,000 views he gets $4. Sorry, that's the system. You're talking about a guy who might make thousands of fucking dollars every single day. We're talking of a person who is probably making something like $20,000, $30,000, even potentially all the way up to $100,000 every single month. You think he gives a shit about $2,000 that he made on one video? just gonna make this point because some people want to believe that, he's just doing this for views and relevancy and money. It's like, the way you gain money on YouTube, and I can tell you this, it's not making one good video that gets, let's say, that video got double or triple the views his other videos recently have made. That's not what makes you money. It's consistent uploads of videos that individually might get less views, but combined together, they make you money. That's what I do. Like, it's not the videos that, the videos that I did that got me 100,000 views, they did great. But I get like 500,000 views a month. So one video like that, sure, it's great. That's rare though. And you go many, many months without something like that. Like for a channel my size, getting a single video that does over 50,000 views in a year is pretty fucking exceptional. Just gonna say that. So that you understand how the system fucking works. Now, it of course depends on the channel, depends on ad revenue, depends on how many ads you put in a video, how many ads YouTube shows to people watching, where people are watching from, so all that. So there's a lot of going this. So don't take this as gospel, but if Legend did indeed make over $1,000 on that video, then those are the kind of numbers he probably floats around. So just gonna give you in the perspective, like to all the people saying, he just played us to get money. The videos on that views are not what are keeping Legend financially afloat. They're not the thing that are making him money. I say that. Like, in fact, I'll speak for myself. A lot of the negative videos, those are not the ones that pay my bills every month. Or all the other costs in my life. Now, let me go with the pot calling kettle black. I've said enough about Legend and all that. Let me just go with that. People say that there is no way CA could have changed their plan so quickly. That's a lot of fucking assumptions in a single statement, by the way. Why is that an assumption? Well, let me just go over a couple of things that would have to be true, unquestionably true, for that to be real. One, you assume that Creative Assembly doesn't have 2 or 3, 4 multiple teams working on DLC concurrently in Warhammer 3 at the moment. You have to assume that. For that to be true, for them to not have changed their plans based on reactions. 2, and actually, let me just finish. Before And the way that probably would work, they would have people working on story, character design, working with Games Workshop to decide which units they're going to include and which they're not. That's probably the earliest process of every single DLC. Things like QA testing, racial reworks, economic, all that, lore effects, etc. That gets out later. But things like character art, character models, story, copyright concerns with Games Workshop deciding that's done many months in advance. I would not be surprised if like every single unit of the fucking Chaos Dwarves was done from concept art level and or even having an actual model well over a year in advance. There's been cases where where people working on CA posted finished game models long before any DLC or content came out for any game or any games came out. Just as an example, I think like there's some models or at least art that was posted by CA, kind of like trying to keep it secret, but it was posted about Warhammer 40k. Just giving you an idea on that. People like this is where we get really angry with Reddit, because on one hand you do have certain or a lot of bad toxic actors, but then you have people that actually do make very useful posts, and you have to sift through a lot of the garbage to get to the useful stuff, because someone found this particular bit of information about 40k and posted it on Reddit, or maybe some Discord and it got picked up, posted on Reddit, whatever. But you have to assume that CA doesn't have multiple content teams working on DLC, and then they get to a point and decide, okay, this is our current plan. Are we going to change it, or are we going to keep it the same, right? They likely have a plan, but their plans have changed like 4 freaking times already in Warhammer 3. That's already happened with just Warhammer 3 alone in 2 fucking years. You think they can't change their plans again? That's the arrogant freaking assumption. It has happened before. If you think it can't happen again, now maybe it didn't happen in this case. I'm not saying that, gentlemen. I'm not saying the leaks are completely true. I'm not using that. I'm saying that the argument that people are making that CA could never change their plans, like they want to argue like people will never change their plans, unless you are unless you are knowledgeable fully and have better sources than anyone that's ever talked about the leaks in CA, unless you actually know about the company structure and their development systems in the company and how they design DLC and how they work on it, that's a pile of fucking garbage. It's speculation. 2, you have to assume that CA did not change their plans, that CA wasn't already designing some other DLC and didn't change their plans before SOC or before the end of the last year. Based on what I've heard, just to mention this, CA really did the 180 at the end of last year. Not when SOC came out. They spent a couple of months sifting through all of fucking Hyenas, Pharaoh, and all that and deciding what they were going to do as a company. They also got purged by Sega, so it took them some months to sort through all of that. And then they decided to change course. They stated this publicly, by the way, like that apology letter in late December. That's what that represented. I actually got contacted by a former CA developer who I had talked to previously, who told me, it's like, wow, you guys really changed something. I didn't necessarily believe it at the time. I stated that publicly in various videos. I didn't believe it. Well, after Thrones Decay. So CA did decide to change course. So you have to wonder, did CA change course on what DLC they were going to do? They certainly did. We know for a fact they did. So why wouldn't they change? So you have to then assume that CA would not change course on their DLC plans just shortly before Thrones Decay came out. Well, that is a big assumption, because it assumes that CA did not have potential multiple options on the table, and dependent on how Thrones Decay was going to go, they wouldn't pick one of those or the other. Because they would have probably done things differently. Like, yes, this is an assumption, but one of the things that was said many times before Thrones Decay came out by people with sources and company and all that is that Thrones Decay was going to make or break, basically, Creative Assembly. But even discounting leaks and all that, you have to assume that Thrones Decay pre-release did not change their plans in any way. Like, when people start seeing Thrones Decay and how the community reacted to it, you have to assume that didn't change their plans in any way. You have to assume that the successful release of Thrones Decay did not have an impact in Creative Assembly after it came out, and it sold quite well. You have to assume, on top of that, that the consistent success of Thrones Decay post-launch hasn't changed things in CA. Because when I say that, Thrones Decay at the moment is the highest peak of consistent players every day in Warhammer 3. And you're telling me that CA would not revise their plans on that alone. Like, that's the real success of Thrones Decay. It's not the release or the content. It's the fact that there's a lot more people playing it consistently for weeks and months, or, well, over a month, that people are playing it far more consistently than they did any other DLC in Warhammer 3, including Forge of the Cast Dwarves. And of course, the launch had a lot of people, but right now it's like consistency for a longer period of time. Then you have to assume that the leaks, all those leaks, and the reaction of the community, the firestorm that was started with Cafe, had no impact whatsoever on CA. In order for CA to not have changed their DLC plans and what type of DLC they were going to do, you have to assume all of this is true. And people accuse me and others of engaging in speculation. Again, pot calling the kettle black. Though who's the pot, who's the kettle, I'll leave that up to you. I say this, though, because like people want to argue like, oh, CA did not change their plans whatsoever based on the way the community reacted and all that. It's the same garbage mentality that people were giving when SOC came out and there were, there was a firestorm in the community and there were certain people arguing making the trash argument that CA, that all the complaints did not matter. Like, yeah, there were a lot of people saying that all the complaints did not matter. It's the same freaking mentality. I would rather not think back on Shadows of Change. It was a fucking disaster. It was not a happy period in my life for a number of reasons. I would rather not think back, but I was reminded of that. Then remember, there were a lot of people defending CA to the hilt back then. Now, they're not defending CA to the hilt. They're just basically saying that the community complaining about Cafe doesn't matter. or they're also basically saying that the people buying Thrones Decay more than they did other DLC doesn't matter. They're saying that the consistent success of CA doesn't matter in terms of DLC plans. Every single one of those things could have led to CA changing their DLC plans significantly. And look, here's one thing I will add on this, the final note. When is the Khorne's Greenskin Ogre DLC comes out? Because the way some people are acting, you guys are believing like it's going to come July and August. If it was coming July, we know about it right now. They're going to announce something on 26, but unless it's a fucking release date then, now, I would not mind. I would not mind it at all if it came out July. That would be fucking amazing for me. Personally, it would be freaking amazing if it came out July. I would love it as a content creator for clear, obvious reasons. I don't necessarily think that. I think July is going to be Pharaoh. Maybe August. I expect at the earliest, we're looking late August or more realistic, late September. And even if it comes out then, you can't assume that CA didn't change their plans because it depends on what they already had available. It could also be that maybe after the community after the Cafe leaks kicked the huge hornet nest, that maybe, shockingly, a company that has hundreds of people working for them may have assigned a lot more people to work on the content. Because we know DLC, according to Andy Hall, is made by like 20 people, where Forge of the Cast Wars was. Even if Thrones Decay was made by 40 people, there's a lot more people you can put on stuff. And again, copyright, art, story, all of that would have likely been done, and probably is done, for virtually every DLC. Like, it wouldn't, like, if you want to know, like, how I feel about that, it is very likely at this point that everything related to, like, Nagash, in terms of art, story, concepts, and all that, is already done. Just to go with that. Certainly Dogs of War is done because we have freaking data mine game files. Goldfang is done, right? Like, I'm not talking about models in game. Like, we have his model in game. We have data mine for Dogs of War. We have something for Karakazorn, apparently. We know the Monkey King is coming and all that. We have enough evidence for all those things. So, yeah. Like, people are acting like if it's impossible for a game developer to change track. How? Tell me how that is fucking impossible. I've seen it before in the industry. It does take some time, sure. But that's the final point I'll leave people by. If the DLC comes in July, sure. You can tell me I ate shit. I'll be fine with that, by the way, because I'll be really fucking happy with it coming July. But even then, I still have to say that maybe they had... But then again, I go back to the point. They might have had multiple fucking teams with the same number of people working on DLC, and they wanted to decide what they were going to release. Something like that. Or they were going to make decisions based on the aftermath of Thrones Decay. It doesn't have to be the impact of the leaks whatsoever. The leaks can be completely irrelevant in CA's decision-making. I'm not saying the leaks changed everything. No, I'm saying that Thrones Decay and its successful launch changed everything. For instance, the leaks may have had an impact. Maybe they didn't have an impact. But Thrones Decay certainly fucking did. On top of that, final point, if it comes out late this year, like October, November, December, then yeah, the leaks were completely fucking right, and they changed their plans based on the Firestorm, or for any number of reasons. Could be any number of reasons, but the later it comes out, the more likely it is the leaks were right. The earlier it comes out, it's more likely the leaks were wrong. And look, I don't think Legend did himself any favors when he said that for certain Cafe is going to come out. I think that's the problem with Legend. He wanted to give as clear a clear statement and as firm of a statement as possible on what CA was going to develop. He didn't say things that he had said in the stream, like he knows Nagash is coming, for instance. He knew the Star Wars stuff was coming long before the DualShocker stuff was coming out, for instance. He just wanted to give like firm statements on this subject. And the thing is, things do change, and that's the point. Yeah, you can criticize Legend for that. That was a big fat mistake on his part, from my perspective. Because Legend, maybe he was completely wrong, maybe he was right, maybe he was completely right, and they changed their plans. I don't know. Anyway, that's all I had to say. Costine signing out. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and enable notifications. Apologies for the little rant, but honestly, it does piss you off sometimes when people spew shit on this subject. Because they're basically CA could never have changed their plans for leaks. Okay, answer the question. Did they change their plans at all because of Thrones Decay? Simple yes or no will suffice. For my part, I firmly believe yes. And you know what? CA themselves have stated that, kind of. When they did the QA before Thrones Decay, they basically said, we're really happy with how the community is reacting to what we've shown so far of Thrones Decay. Make of that what you will.